And I know you know how to do the video thing, so.
Yeah. That's it should not be a problem. Um, yep. Now let me go ahead and put that up. Yeah, go ahead and take us live, and I'll get some video going.
And we are. Hello. We have a Claire Gack and a Bombats and a Kit London in chat.
Aw,
Look at that.
I know all those people,
You
and
do.
I like all those people. Well, I like most of those people. Just
I've got
kidding.
my water bottle ready. I've had a weird sinus thing myself, so I get this occasional little dry spot in my throat where it's like I want to cough, but I don't need to cough, but it's that constant tickle of I need to.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really
makes
annoying.
sense. I should pull up the Twitch so I can see the chat. Although, last thing I should do is get distracted by
It's
the chat over here as well.
No, Claire, it's not COVID. It's not even. It's like once a day, and it's some gunk from my nose gets caught in my throat, and I just have to. It's annoying. But Wicked Kitten in there too. Look at that.
You know why she's here? She's here to make sure that I don't ever call Michael Myers Mike Myers. That's what she's here. That's the big reason that she's here, Monica.
You have seen Baby
Shrek?
Driver?
Yes, I have.
That joke in Baby Driver is so good.
It is, yes. Yeah, and Monica brought that up to me too, because she actually did call me out on during Film Sack. Apparently I said Mike Myers when I meant to say Michael Myers, which surprised me because for me that feels as weird as calling the singer of Billie Jean Mike Jackson.
It does, doesn't
it just doesn't feel right. It feels weird. Good old Mike Jackson.
Yeah, Mikey Jackson. All right. Well, you're sounding good. Everything's coming through clear. You can hear me. You can hear this as well, right?
Sometimes may be good, sometimes may be shit.
Okay.
I hear all that. Yep.
Excellent. So you will hear the opening and ending. No problem. Well.
Excellent. And you usually do what, like 45 minutes, an hour? What?
It's usually around an hour. It's just kind of however long the conversation goes.
Totally makes sense. All right. I'm just going to I'm going to text Tina and let her know. But
okay.
So she doesn't start watching like Barbarian or something. Like, oh, sorry, I'm going to interrupt it. Ha.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, while you do that, I will get the show started and we'll get going.
Cool.
So, I got my recording going, and we are going to start in 3, 2, 1.
Nobody listens. There's nothing else I can do. You can get back in there and get back on that telephone, tell him exactly who walked out of here last night, and tell him exactly where he's going.
Probably going.
I'm wasting my time.
Sam Haddonfield is 150 miles away from here. Now, for God's sakes, he can't drive a car.
He was doing very well last night.
Okay, record go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? And it's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, it's a movie that one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, a.k.a. TV's Travis. This is episode number 190, and it's Halloween this week. So we watched Halloween from 1978, and joining me to talk about it, because he had never seen it before, the host of Coverville, the co-host of TMS, it's Brian Ibbott. Brian, how are you?
Hello. I'm secretly, slowly coming out of the shadows in the background where you don't see me until it's too late.
Oh, no. All right,
the
so
William Shatner mask.
So you let mention one day that you had never seen any of the Halloween movies, which my radar picked up on.
I know, yeah. As soon as I think it's like you don't even have to be listening to the podcast that I'm saying that on for like your spider sense to tingle and say, "Wait a minute, that's the bat signal." I'm going to mix my superhero metaphors here, but it's like the bat signal for you, where it's like somebody out there is saying they haven't seen a popular movie that everybody else has seen.
What's that? I'm being called.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm curious how, because I know you're a movie guy. You do movie podcasts. You like a lot of movies. How is it you just didn't even accidentally see this in the last 44 years?
Right. It's okay. There's a few factors here. Number one, I feel like I've seen enough clips from it. Well, let me rephrase that. I feel like I had seen enough clips from it to say, oh, I pretty much get the gist of what Halloween is. Okay, no problem there. Two, in the late 70s and even into the 80s with Friday the 13th, not so much the Nightmare on Elm Street stuff, because that I had no problem convincing friends to go see, but there were no friends of mine who wanted to go see Halloween, Friday the 13th, any of those movies. I talked them into Nightmare on Elm Street just because there was a comedy factor in there that I could kind of, get them behind. But nobody, like even my Uncle George, who was the guy that I saw every movie with at that time. He and I went the night before Star Wars was generally released because he had won tickets from a radio station to see the sneak preview of Star Wars May 24th. And so we saw that, and every movie, like, if there was any sort of big movie, he was the guy who would take me to see it. And he didn't care for slasher movies. Again, a surprise, because he, as a kid, was really into monster movies and made me watch all of the Universal monster movies, all of the, like, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 70s kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But slashers, specifically slasher movies, just not his bag, and so because of that became not my bag, or not really available to me.
Okay. All right. So I can see that. So it's 44 years after the movie's released. There's a whole choose your own adventure of timelines for the Halloween franchise. Which
is there really? I was wondering about that. I was wondering about the lore and the path through the Michael Myers Uber. Is it just basically okay?
Well, we'll dive into that a little bit, because I can kind of steer you in the paths of which of the tracks to take that are worth watching.
Okay, good, because I do want to continue watching these. I guess one of your first questions is going to be, did I like it?
Yeah,
but I'll wait till you ask it.
Well, so as a first time watch, what did you think of it?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it. There was a lot more to it than I expected based on all the clips I'd seen. It's absolutely surprised me that the movie begins with an origin story, because typically my experience with slasher movies is maybe you get, the origin as part of a spoken thing at the end, like, oh no, it was his mother who did this to him, or
right.
Whatever, or it was his mother who was doing the killings all along, or anything like that. But for the movie to begin with the quote unquote origin of Mike Myers, at least his first kill, his sister, that was kind of a surprise. I thought that there would be a lot more interaction between he and Jamie Lee Curtis throughout the film, and not just near the end of the film. That's really what the last third of the film is, him and Jamie Lee Curtis. And I don't know what I expected with the friends, but I mean, come on, once you meet the promiscuous friend, she's gonna die.
Yeah, and so funny thing there, real quick, was Carpenter has said and Deborah Hill, who was the producer and co-wrote it with him, had said, like, there was no morality tale at play here. There wasn't like the promiscuous people die first because of that. Okay. It was literally they had envisioned it as, no, they're just not paying attention to their surroundings because they're too busy having sex. Whereas Jamie Lee Curtis's character is more repressed and like pays attention more because she's by herself a lot. So I just thought that was
convenient.
Yeah, it just fit into that so well. So that's it's an interesting movie. I love the opening. So one of the things I love about this movie is it kicks off right with, like, the opening credits are super simple. It's just the slow push in on a jack-o'-lantern while they play the music. And so starting off with that music and setting the tone for kind of what you're going to get for the next hour and a half is great. And then that opening, which ironically is the last thing that they shot while making the movie, was the opening sequence. Because that house they were using was an actual abandoned house. And
so they needed to, like, keep it looking abandoned for the filming, and then clean it up for the for the intro, basically.
Yeah, and that intro. So that intro is great. It's a tracking shot. There's a couple of cuts. If you're paying attention, you can kind of notice where they are. When he picks the mask up and puts it over the mask goes over the POV. That's a cut there.
Turns
and then
into just the eye holes. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a technical limitation. The film, the actual magazine for film only allowed them about 4 minutes of continuous filming. That's all the film it could hold. So they had to work those cuts in, but they had like the entire crew overnight. They did something like 20 takes of that. And it was just like people hanging off of balconies with lights and like scrambling to get everything done. And then they would finish up and they would go back through and they'd reset everything and run it again over and over and over. And they were using a Panaglide Steadicam. They were one of the first movies to use that. And so it was heavy. And they had their first camera person and they did like 4 or 5 takes and they were worn out. So then they had the director of photography running through with it and they wore him out.
Which isn't surprising because part of that tracking shot is going up the stairs. And that's, carrying one of those big Steadicam setups, the rigs has got to be like, not just heavy, but also like an OSHA violation or some sort of danger.
Yeah.
to the cameraman. Wow.
They're heavy, they're counterweighted, and you have to move in a certain way to be as smooth as possible too. So like trying to go up and down stairs is not easy with one of those either. So that opening shot, what it does for me too is it establishes so much story, but it also gives you a visual of the movie and the fact that, oh, this isn't just a cheap horror movie. This is going to be something that looks really good, which it is a cheap horror movie. They made this movie for $325,000.
Wow.
And
it's unheard of these days.
And like 70,000 of that was that Panaglide from Panavision, the camera rig, because Carpenter wanted Panavision cameras for the 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio of the film, and he wanted that Panaglide. They were one of the first ones to use it to have those POV shots and those handhelds look better, and it was totally worth the investment. Like they spent so much of their budget on that, but it works because it makes the rest of the movie just look better. It doesn't look like a shoestring budget, even though it absolutely was.
No, it's got kind of that Exorcist, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and bring it up again, but that kind of look to it where it is a professionally done film, but it's a slasher, and the slasher movies that came before it certainly had that kind of cheap gonzo feel to them, and this one really didn't have that, which was great.
Yeah, and even movies that came out like if you've ever seen, I don't know if you have or not, The Slumber Party Massacre is one that's contemporary to this.
Not only have I seen it, for some reason, somebody gave me the poster, which sat on my which hung on my dorm room wall for the entirety of the time I lived in dorms.
Oh, that's
for some reason, and probably kept me from having bringing a lot of women back to the dorm, or probably kept them from staying. I think is probably
that might send the wrong message.
Yeah, exactly. But, hey, come on back.
But that's a movie that was made roughly the same time. I think it was like a year or two later for about the same budget. And and while I also had a great time and enjoyed The Slumber Party Massacre, like the feel of the two movies is so different in terms of like the production value. And it just shows like how you can stretch a budget and what you can do, which is great because horror movies are traditionally very cheap to make. Because a lot of times you have young, up-and-coming, unknown actors, so you don't have to pay them a whole lot. In this case, I think Donald Pleasance made the most on the movie, and he was paid $25,000 to do it.
Wow. Again, just a ridiculously cheap salary for an actor. Even then, I'm guessing was a pretty cheap salary.
Oh yeah, actually, because originally Carpenter wanted either Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee for the role, and Cushing's agent turned it down, and Lee turned it down because he wasn't going to get paid enough. And I guess he went on to say in interviews later on that he kind of regretted doing that. Because this is, I mean, Dr. Loomis would totally be a Christopher Lee role. I could see him doing. I could see either one of them doing it.
For sure.
But
and Donald Pleasance, it's kind of funny talking about this because I just watched a movie that I was going to use for recommendals called The Legacy. I don't have the DVD case down here near me, but it was a Sam Elliott and Catherine Ross film that had Roger Daltrey, and basically takes place in a mansion where people are getting killed by, we don't know what, but turns out it's this it's the head wait staff person who's kind of a nun who can turn into a cat, and yeah. But what's cool about that, and I can't remember the actor's name, but it's got this actor who a lot of people recognize from Rocky Horror Picture Show as the narrator, the guy with no neck.
Okay.
He played Blofeld in one of the James Bond movies, as did Loomis, Donald Pleasance, which is where I know him best from, is the You Only Live Twice Blofeld.
Yep. Yeah. He had quite a career. I guess it was a Western that Carpenter had seen prior to this movie that made him want to end up going with Donald Pleasance. And I love this bit of trivia where he's on the set making Halloween. Mm-hmm. He's easily the most experienced person in filmmaking on this set, because the crew, not only were all the actors young, all of this crew were just young kids, because it was Carpenter and a bunch of his friends and like relatives and stuff that were all fresh out of film school. And he went to Carpenter saying he didn't understand the script. And I don't know why I'm in this movie. I don't know who my character is. The only reason I'm doing this movie is because I have alimony to pay. And my daughter is in England in a rock and roll group, and she said that the music you did for Assault on Precinct 13 was cool. And
oh, that's great.
Like, I can completely see him doing that, because Donald Pleasance was a pretty like affable and funny guy. Even though
really,
like, you see him in this or you see him in Bond, and he just doesn't seem like that at all. But
does not. No.
Apparently he was just this real big-hearted guy. He really like took to the crew of this afterwards, and like he ended up working with Carpenter again a few times. Just last week we were talking about Prince of Darkness, and Donald Pleasance was in that. Mm-hmm. So it's just cool to find, like, here's Carpenter, who's in his mid-20s, fresh out of film school, has done like 2 movies before this, neither of which were very big. And he gets this guy, and he ends up being a really nice guy, and they develop a decent relationship. So I thought that was kind of neat to read about over the years.
For sure.
Because this was a movie that, like, there's no earthly reason it should have been the hit that it was, because Carpenter had done 2 movies prior to this, Dark Star and Assault on Precinct 13. So he had done a sci-fi movie and then this like action movie kind of remake of Rio Bravo. Okay.
So no indication that he was going to be doing a horror movie from that trajectory.
No, none at all. Then he his demands to make it, the producer of it was a guy named Erwin Yablans, and he was a film distributor. He had started off being there's a great episode of The Movies That Made Us on Netflix about Halloween. And I highly recommend it, because it has...
Yeah, now that I've seen this, I probably skipped over it because I hadn't seen Halloween, so I probably skipped over that one when I was watching those.
It's great because it's got interviews from all sorts of people, and one of them is Erwin Yablans, and he had started off as like a truck loader back in his days at Warner Brothers and started doing film distribution in like the 60s. But his wife was like, "You like making movies so much, why don't you make one of your own?" And so he decided, okay, I'll give it a try. And they end up making Halloween. And when he was talking to Carpenter, Carpenter's like, "All right, I want $10,000 to make it, but I want to direct, write, produce, and score it." And Yablans was like, "Look, if you can do it for $300,000, you can do whatever you want."
Wow.
And so that's how it came about. And they made this movie for $325,000 was the final budget, and it made US over $47 million at the box office.
It's amazing.
Like, it's just crazy, and launched the career of Carpenter and Jamie Lee Curtis.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, this was, I think we get the introducing Jamie Lee Curtis in the opening credits. Is that, do I remember that correctly, or was it, Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was her first film, like major film role, was this movie. And part of it was obviously her being the daughter of Janet Leigh. Yablans was like, "Oh, definitely, we got to try and cast
pedigree
her for it."
of right.
And the funny thing was, like, PJ Souls, who played her friend Linda has said in interviews that like those two of them are the opposite. Like Jamie Lee's much more the free-spirited one, and she's like the homebody.
Really?
So for them
interesting.
to
Yeah, because
play,
they both play opposite characters. Than they are. Huh.
And you got the three girls. So it's Jamie Lee Curtis, it's PJ Souls, and Annie. Annie is played by
Nancy Kyes or Keys.
Yeah,
or Nancy,
Keys. Yeah, she was Nancy Loomis at the time. She actually was the wife of the production designer.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So she helped in the costume department too, according to him.
And PJ Souls I knew from Carrie, one of the girls that teases the crap out of Carrie and turns her into what she is. But I'd forgotten that she was also one of the love interests in Stripes, the Bill Murray and Harold Ramis. One of the women they bring back to.
I haven't seen Stripes in so long. I completely forgot she was in that.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, and the three of them, I think, are like they only have a few scenes that they're all together, but their chemistry was great. It really felt like three friends. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jamie Lee being the only one that was actually in high school age at the time, because I think she was like 18.
It's so funny seeing people who look like they're in their late 20s, early 30s, playing teenagers, playing high schoolers, but. I'm surprised that Jamie Lee Curtis was high school age, because I would have guessed that she would have been in her early 20s, mid 20s.
Yeah,
but
and
I guess not.
Some of that is like fashion styles too. Like the style of clothing that they're wearing definitely changes like how you perceive them. The late 70s fashions for high school kids was very different from even when probably you were in high school. So like
for sure
different than when I was, and. So it's odd. I also have it's always so weird for me to see Jamie Lee Curtis with long hair.
Yeah, just saw an episode of Love Boat from the late 70s where she had really long hair, like past shoulder length.
Oh wow,
long hair, and it just for a second I was trying to figure out is that really Jamie Lee Curtis? Like the face shape is so. Indistinct or unique and recognizable, but there's still that little with long hair. No, that can't be Jamie Lee Curtis. But she looks great with long hair, short hair.
Yeah, and she really pulls off this role, I think. Well, she apparently didn't think she was at first, like because she got a call from John Carpenter after like the first night or two of shooting, and she was worried she was getting fired. But no, he was just like, nah, you've done great. But I think she was just incredibly nervous at being kind of her first film role. But she's great. I think really the performances throughout the movie are pretty good overall because they feel believable as the characters that they're playing. These kind of small town Midwest kids that have never experienced anything like this before. And so, like, reactions kind of made sense. Some of it, I mean, admittedly, Annie's death scene in the car, for instance, is very over the top.
It is, yes.
So, did you notice when you were watching it, did it register to you how there's, like, no blood in the movie?
Oh, I didn't even pick up on that. I guess, I mean, you see blood on his sister, the first victim, but there's no splatter. Like, it's just basically smeared on the actors. Now, was there none of that later on through the movie? That blows my mind because I didn't even notice the fact that it wasn't there.
No, and it's funny. You kind of project that on in your own head as you're watching it. So that was Irwin Yablans wanted to make a horror film, but he wanted to make a horror film without blood because for him it was always scarier what you would have in your mind, and so kind of that radio drama theater of the mind thing. He wanted to. The way he put it is he wanted no blood, and he wanted it to be a movie where you would make everyone look to the right and then scare them from the left. Yeah. And
that's you see early versions of that. Yeah, it's the trope that has been used a million times since, but it's I'm going to look under the bed and then I'm going to stand up and the thing that I'm looking for will be right behind me, or I'll open the closet, close the closet, and behind the closet door as you close it, the monster's there or the slasher's there. But seeing it, seeing the kind of genesis of all of that is fantastic.
Yeah, it's really cool, and the bloodless part of it I think is interesting because as the franchise has gone on, it's gotten a lot bloodier and a lot more gory, as all horror movies do. But it was a point in this one, and I think it works to the movie's favor because you never get taken out of a moment from like an effect that either looks like, if you watch, say, Friday the 13th, the original one now, those effects for the time and Tom Savini, what he worked on, are incredible. But you watch them now, and there are moments where you're like, okay, that's obviously like a prosthetic piece over her neck, and then it gets cut. And you don't have any of that, and it's like the whole movie has to be built around the atmosphere.
Yeah, and when you don't have that, you don't spend the time trying to figure out how they do it. You just go with it. Right. It totally makes sense. It seems like a Hitchcockian thing, right? Because I mean Psycho obviously had the blood, the chocolate syrup that swirls down the drain, but I'm trying to remember like Frenzy, which was a serial killer film. I don't remember a lot of blood. I guess it's because that one was a necktie murder and not a slasher.
Yeah.
For the serial killer, but it does feel like Hitchcock probably, wanted the same kind of things, a very blood-free horror movie.
Yeah, and
might have been an influence. Huh.
I'm sure it was, because I know Carpenter was definitely a fan of Hitchcock, obviously doing a suspenseful horror film like that. And he was on board. He's like, yeah, we can do it with no blood, no problem. He didn't. Probably also because he wasn't a horror film director. Like, he didn't think of himself as that. But what it does is it forces them to really build the atmosphere. And it's an hour and a half long, and that first hour is just setting a scene and building this narrative. And I've talked to some people like, oh, the first Halloween's boring, which I get. I can understand that if you see it, but when you really sit down and kind of pay attention to what's going on, the boring is just them building everything so that you actually care about these characters that end up dying.
Exactly. And I think suspense gets forgotten about, like as a horror movie requirement, because so many just fall back on the jump scares, the gore, but there's this this thing that you've got to do where the audience knows what's about to happen. They can see the killer across the street. Jamie Lee Curtis hasn't seen him yet, or maybe sees him out of the corner of her eye but hasn't looked over to see him yet. And that's the great suspense. It's the audience knowing what's going to happen, or suspecting what's going to happen, as opposed to both the audience and the character getting surprised at the same time by it. And I love good suspense,
Yeah, and that feeling, it also is that slow building feeling of dread as you're watching the movie, where it's like,
exactly.
You're watching this movie and you know people are going to start dying. Like, it's a slasher movie. Yeah. Even again, like you hadn't seen it, but you know it's going to happen, so now you're waiting for that, and it's just building and building and building. And that music, John Carpenter's music throughout the whole thing is it's a minimalist score, and it's so effective.
It's as iconic as the Exorcist theme, the Mike Oldfield, because it's very, very simple, but it just uses this small number of notes just to kind of build the tension, the suspense. Jaws, kind of the same thing. John Williams' Jaws, where it's staying within 2 or 3 notes, but using the sharps and flats as opposed to going up full notes. It just adds such a level of danger and terror. It's great. It does.
And he did the theme was in 5/4 time, so it's an odd time signature, which feels a little weird too. And Carpenter would score a lot of his own movies, and I talked about this last week with Prince of Darkness. He would do a lot of his scores. He would do as like almost improving, where he would take the movie and be watching it in front of his keyboards and just kind of noodle around and figure out the music as he's watching the scenes. And I love that, because his style of scores are always like this bed below what's going on in the scene, as opposed to like John Williams' scores really tell you what the scene is and what's going on. And it's like Carpenter does almost the inverse of that. He's like, the scene is going on and I'm just going to punch that up. I'm just going to kind of add to it.
Right. Yeah. Instead of telegraphing the style of the scene you're seeing, it's really just complementing it. It's just providing the tension for it, basically.
Yeah, and then the wonderful use of "Don't Fear the Reaper," the one licensed song.
I really appreciate. Yes, I really did appreciate hearing that. It's like, oh wow, okay, this would have been one of the earliest movie uses of that song because it had only come out like 5 years before.
Yeah, and they're playing that while they're in the car with Michael Myers driving behind them, which is great.
Yeah, again, the audience sees him and the audience is aware of him, but nobody else is. That's such a great,
My favorite use of that in this movie is right after that scene. So after the girls have pulled up and talked to Sheriff Brackett, and then they drive away, and Loomis walks up. And at the beginning, right before that scene started, you saw Michael Myers he pulled the car off to the side of the road. And then as Loomis is walking up and talking to him, you see the car come up in the background and sit at the corner. And Loomis is like looking one way, looking the other, and the car drives off. And I'm just like, oh, I love that moment because he's right there. He's close enough you could throw a rock and hit him, and you have no clue. And he's not even
a great cat and mouse.
Oh, and he's not even subtle. He's driving around in that mask,
and even turns around and looks, as he goes by with the mask. It's like,
it's
almost like he wants to be caught. Oh,
yeah,
so good.
The cat and mouse of that is so good.
It is.
So the mask, you sort of know the story of the mask, or you know where it kind of came from.
All I know is that it's a William Shatner, like it's a Captain Kirk mask, right?
Yeah. So they were looking at masks, and according to trivia stuff that I've read, they went to Don Post Productions, who did masks for Hollywood, and initially went to them with, hey, we want to make a mask, but we can't really pay for one. We'll give you points in the movie. And Don Post was like, nah, we're not going to do that, because they would apparently get that offer a lot. So they ended up, Tommy Lee Wallace went out and he bought a couple of masks. They had this clown mask of some sort. I can't remember, they said the name of it. But they tried that out. It looked creepy and it was weird, but he also bought a Captain Kirk mask. And they took that, he removed the eyebrows and the sideburns. He trimmed those off, took some white appliance paint and painted the whole mask white, and then darkened in the hair, painted that down, and widened out the eye holes. And they ended up going with that because it was much creepier, because it looked so emotionless on the character, because it's just this blank white face. And they only had one of them for the entire movie. So, and it's funny because just recently for Gore, we covered Halloween 2. And they used the same mask in that, but it was all beat to hell and it was slightly yellowed, because throughout the entire run of the first movie, the guy that was playing him kept, would have it in his back pocket or something else. And then Deborah Hill took it home for a couple of years and like kept it under her bed, and she was a heavy smoker. And so it started to yellow from that, like the paint was chipping off of it. And now it's such an iconic mask now, and to think they bought a $2 Captain Kirk mask and some spray paint, and they made that,
some appliance paint, and just did that. The clips, the trailers that I've seen for things like Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends look like the mask has even been melted or burnt or something like that, which I assume take place in some of the other films, or is that just the weathering and the chipping of the paint?
So those are definitely from like story beats. In one of the movies, because it's a slasher series, so the killer has been killed many, many times over,
of course,
in varying ways. And the mask quality can also help to inform you how good the movie is going to be, because some of the later sequels have really poor versions of the mask.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, there's some that just look awful. And you have to wonder, like, why would you even... Like, why? It's not that difficult a mask to recreate. How did you mess it up this bad? Like, they'll have different colored hair or whatever. And part of that, too, is it's just so many different people have played Michael Myers over the years. But in this movie, he was played by, like, 5 different people at some point or another. Some of them were like...
Obviously, the kid version and the adult version, of course.
So there was the kid version. There was the adult version that's wearing the mask and walking around most of the time. That is Nick Castle, who... he went on to be a director himself. Actually, he directed The Last Starfighter, is a movie that you would have seen that he's done. So I always like to tell people that Michael Myers directed The Last Starfighter. He was a friend of John Carpenter's from USC, and he's like, hey, he's shooting a movie. It's like 2 miles from my house. I'm just going to go hang out, because he had gone to film school. He was getting ready to work on, I think, one of his first directorial pictures soon. So he wanted to go and just kind of demystify the experience and just be on a set and see a movie getting made on a pro level instead of a student level. And Carpenter was like, well, you want to just wear the mask and like all you got to do is walk from here to there, you know, and that's how he ended up being. And so there's great behind the scenes photos of him. There's a really famous one where it's Nick Castle, and he's got the mask kind of resting on top of his head, and he's got a can of Dr. Pepper, like the mask is drinking the Dr. Pepper.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he ended up in this movie, and then in the 3 recent ones, they brought him back to be in them, either as the Shape, which is how the character is credited. It was written in the script, was called the Shape.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, they very rarely use the name Michael Myers in the script because the Shape was him in the mask, and it was
makes sense.
Yeah,
so when they referred to Michael Myers, it would be without the mask, like you see when the mask comes off.
Yep.
In this movie. Okay.
And that was a different actor. That wasn't Nick Castle. So the one shot where the mask comes off, they used a different guy that had, I guess, like more of a baby face, and they wanted that kind of juxtaposition of the innocence from this crazy person. So they had a different actor do that. But then Tommy Lee Wallace, the production designer, was in the mask a couple of times for shots where he had to break through like fake doors. And Nick Castle has a great moment where he says like, yeah, Tommy was like, let me do this scene because if I mess up, it's on me and not on you. And we only have one of these doors. So he did that. And then I think Deborah Hill actually stood in the mask in one of the long shots because nobody was on set that day that was able to do it. And she had brought the mask with her. And so she threw on the coveralls and the mask, and there you go.
Yeah, you don't need, right, exactly. There's no spoken lines. She's probably the one like way off behind the car standing next to the house or something, like one of those shots. That's great. I think I prefer my killers silent, like Jason, like Michael Myers. I think Leatherface doesn't. I guess he does utter some lines, doesn't he?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
And that may be why the Nightmare on Elm Street movies are so much more, not mainstream, but more accessible to people who get scared easily, because Robert Englund, delivering lines, especially comedic lines, playing off of the things that he's doing, grounds the character more, as opposed to this mindless object that is just coming towards you to kill you without, any sort of spending time trying to come up with the best one-liner as he does it.
Yeah, and I mean, for one, the levity will help to break some of that tension. It adds a camp factor to it. But I think, too, relatable is probably the best way to put that. Because I know Carpenter didn't want you to be able to relate to Michael Myers at all. And that idea
and giving
of
him a voice would have ruined that.
Yeah, and that idea of like there's no reasoning with this. It is like just a force of nature that you can't stop, you can't do anything about. It's just you run or you die. So I can see that. What was one of my notes was the motion at the end where he sits up in the background.
Oh yeah.
I'm wondering if that inspired WWE's The Undertaker or not. Like, I have to feel like it did, because that was one of his signature moves. He would do that exact same sit up in the middle of the ring. But it's such a cool moment because it's just like it's such an unnatural motion to make.
It is. It's almost robotic. Like it's almost like he's being pulled up because it's so quick, and then the head turns like he's being raised by some force, by some unknown entity, and then given the awareness as he turns his head, like, oh, okay, I'm back to life here.
Yeah, and I have read at some point where John Carpenter said in an interview that some of the basis of Michael Myers in terms of his movement was Yul Brynner's character in Westworld.
Oh, sure. Okay.
And that robotic nature. But then I also will see stuff where it's like Nick Castle would go to him like, well, what's, trying to figure out the character as he's playing it. And Carpenter would be like, your motivation is to walk from that mark to that mark. So just do that. And he kind of came up with the head tilt was, I think, a Nick Castle thing, sort of almost like a dog kind of examining, the dead bodies. Like he doesn't fully grasp what's going on around him. And some of that, I think, makes sense given that he's been in an institution for 15 years and he hasn't really been around people. And I love, too, that, like, this whole movie, you don't know anything about Michael other than he killed his sister at 6 years old and he's been institutionalized since then. And that makes him scary.
Sure. It does. Yeah, exactly. Because it's again, the more information you find out about him would probably humanize him and give him something relatable to the audience. And the audience, for the most part, didn't kill their sister when they grew up and didn't spend most of their life, 15 years, 16 years in an institution between that time and now.
Yeah.
So, if you show him as a teenager driving a car with his buddies who eventually would steer him into the wrong path, then it humanizes him too much and gives him something the audience can relate to, which you don't want.
Okay, so that makes for a really good segue into the timelines of Halloween and the choose your own adventures that we have. So
sure,
this has been kind of retconned and redone over the years. So this movie came out. It was a huge hit. Not initially, like it got released, so no studio wanted to pick it up. And Irwin Yablans ended up going back to his booking background, and he debuted the film in one city. He debuted it in Kansas City in 1978. And his hope was, all right, I'm going to do this. I'll do this in a small town. And if it does well, then I can use that and roll it into the next town. And if it doesn't do well, then I just ignore it and try to bury that and move on. And it did well. Like, it was, the first day was modest, but then by day 2 it was double, and it just kept going, and it was word of mouth. And so then from there he took it to Chicago, and it blew up, and it just became a huge thing. So, and then also the brilliance of naming it Halloween meant that the next year they were able to do more theatrical run for it by the following Halloween, because they could just tie it into that that thing. But Carpenter never wanted to make like a franchise out of Halloween in the sense of like continuing that story. He felt, I've told the story, there's no more story to tell, which he famously said, shows that I was wrong. But they kind of forced him to write a sequel. Like, he was under contract, and so he wrote the sequel Halloween 2. And but he didn't direct it. He wanted to do something more along the lines of like an anthology series. He wanted to do more movies based around the holiday of Halloween and that time of year.
Not around Michael Myers.
Yeah. And so then they made Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, which was, has nothing to do with Michael Myers, nothing to do with Laurie Strode. It's a completely different story. And it bombed. Nobody wanted to see it because they'd already made 2 movies now with Michael Myers, and this movie came out. So it was another, I think it was 5 years before the next movie hit. And they made Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. So, and then they ended up doing 2 more movies in that, and they call them, fans call them the Thorn Cult Trilogy, because there's a whole thing by the 6th movie that has to do with a cult that are that use Michael Myers as some sort of an avatar to kill family members, or it's very convoluted because they didn't even know what they were doing. Like, there's a character in, I think it's the 4th movie, we see this character called the Man in Black, and he's just wearing all black hat and all this. You never see his face. And then they tried to expand on that character in the sequel, but that character had no point. There was nothing to expand on. They literally just created a mysterious character in the previous movie. So then they had to like backfill and make all of this convoluted story. So it gets really bad. They also the 4, 5, and 6 deal with Laurie's daughter, but Laurie is not in them at all. She's killed in a car accident off screen before the fourth movie because Jamie Lee Curtis wasn't going to come back.
Yeah, good way to explain why Jamie Lee Curtis isn't there. Was her daughter played by somebody who went on to be famous for something else, or was it?
The daughter was played
known
by shoot, I'm trying to remember her name now because I've seen her in a lot. Let's see, IMDb.
I can pull it up actually. Yeah.
But she was she played the daughter for 2 movies. And then has gone on to have a decent career. Danielle Harris, that's her name.
Danielle Harris, okay.
She's been in. She went on to do
yeah.
Hatchet. She was in, and she's done quite a bit. But she played a young Jamie Lloyd was her name.
Okay.
And so those first 6 movies are kind of their own timeline. Well, 5 of the 6 of them, and then Season of the Witch is just the outlier off on its own.
On its own, yeah.
But then in 1998, they made Halloween H2O, also known as 20 Years Later. And that brought back Jamie Lee Curtis. And it was made as a direct sequel to Halloween 2. So it ignored 4, 5, and 6. She doesn't have a daughter anymore. Now she has a son, played by Josh Hartnett, who is a high school senior. They're living in California. And she's changed her name, moved him to California, and there's all sorts of stuff going on. And Michael Myers comes back, and they made that, and that was supposed to once again kind of end the series. They didn't want to do any more,
sure.
So it has it ends. Well, then it was popular enough they made a sequel to it called Halloween Resurrection a few years later.
Okay.
So now you've got your second timeline, which is Halloween 1, 2, H2O, and Resurrection.
Okay.
Rob Zombie comes along a few years later and wants to make his own version of Halloween. Same story, but set in its own. So it has nothing, it's not connected to any of the Jamie Lee Curtis stuff, but it's still Laurie Strode, Michael Myers, all of that. He does.
But it picks up, does it continue the story, or does it just reboot the story with Michael Myers gets out of the institution, finds Laurie Strode, pursues her, and
reboots? Yep, it's a totally new version.
All right, gotcha.
And he makes Halloween, and then kind of actually similarly, he didn't really want to do a sequel, but they wanted a sequel because it was popular enough. So he's like, fine, if I do a sequel, I'm making my own movie. And he went way out and gets kind of crazy with like the weirdness. And I mean, Rob Zombie's always doing weird stuff anyway, but this is like Rob Zombie getting to just do whatever he wants, and it's very weird. It also has the one problem of Michael Myers speaks in the second movie.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's only like one line, I think, but it's still enough. Also, my problems with the Rob Zombie Halloweens actually echo a lot of what you said earlier, which is like backstory. It spends the first 40 minutes of the movie with Michael as a kid, and you learn about his upbringing and his. It's a Rob Zombie movie, so of course it's all a bunch of white trash people, basically. Is the nicest way I can put it. But it's my problem with it was it's like it takes away all the mystery and the mystique of Michael Myers just being this crazy evil person, because now he had this horrible upbringing and he was treated bad by his stepdad and all this kind of stuff. So those movies exist on their own. You can watch them or not, but.
And I noticed that Danielle Harris appears as a completely different character in the Rob Zombie Halloween.
Yes.
So not as Laurie Strode's daughter, but as Annie Brackett.
Yeah. So she's the friend of Laurie Strode in that one, because it's all the same characters.
Annie. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Zombie's version has all the same characters, and it's largely a similar story.
Full reboot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And like, there's parts of his movies I think, like casting Brad Dourif as Sheriff Brackett, I thought was great, because I just love Brad Dourif and everything. But yeah, it just there's something missing in those movies, and it's that there's too much backstory. But then 2018 rolls around. Now we're at the 40th anniversary of the original Halloween, and David Gordon Green decides that he wants to make his own sequel. It's produced by
Oh, okay. So not even the second one, not even
the
the one
second
that
one.
was considered to be lore up until now. Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
So this timeline branches off after the first movie and takes place 40 years later, where Michael's been back in an institution, back in prison that whole time, and Laurie has basically been a trauma survivor and a prepper, and she's they show her like at her house where she's out shooting guns and like preparing for the day that he gets out and comes back. Like she's just
all right.
spent her entire life paranoid that that's going to happen. Like every time he has a parole hearing, she sits outside the courthouse waiting just in case, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they made Kills and Ends, and so that's your third or fourth timeline.
Fourth timeline. I mean, I guess fourth if you count Season of the Witch as being its own little weird offshoot baby.
Yeah. Yep. What I recommend, this movie obviously this is one of my favorite horror movies. This is one that I watch pretty much yearly right around this time. It's that blueprint for a slasher movie. It's all the tropes of a slasher movie. It's where a lot of those tropes came from.
Right.
And I love the pacing, the suspense, all of that. After this one, it's kind of can get a little hit and miss on the sequels. Halloween 2 is also, I think, pretty good. It ups the gore a little bit. There's a little more blood. It continues. It's actually a continuation of this night. So Halloween 2 is the exact same night. And it's sort of the fallout of all that. So it's got, the same sheriff comes back. It's got a lot of the same actors in it, or characters. And then, new characters are introduced. A lot of it takes place in a hospital where Laurie is recovering from everything that's happened. But it also brought about the twist in that movie that became lore and continued on for the majority of the Halloween sequels, which you probably are aware of. I don't know if you were or not, the connection between Michael and Laurie.
Oh, I'm not. I knew there was one, but I don't remember what the connection was. So maybe, I mean, I won't
spoil it for you.
Okay.
I'll let you watch it, but the connection is made in Halloween 2, and that connection doesn't. And so because of that, the new trilogy of movies doesn't have that same connection between the two of them.
Sure.
Because it doesn't take that movie into account.
Right. It veers off from the first movie. So let's say that I decide, all right, I'm gonna just go right in and watch another Halloween movie. My inclination is to go to the 2018 Halloween and continue on with Kills and Ends.
I think that the 2018 Halloween is probably my favorite of the sequels, although it's so weird because Kills works well, but Ends feels almost like it needs to be its own movie, and like it works. Having just seen Ends, for me, it works better as a standalone than it does kind of in continuation of the story, just based on some choices that they made. But I do think that they're all really good. I do think Halloween 2 is worth watching. I would avoid the
original Halloween 2.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I would the Rob Zombie ones, I would put those at the bottom of your list.
Sure.
Because you've already seen the original Halloween and it's the same story, just with the Rob Zombie flavor all over it. And also they made a weird casting decision of making Michael Myers. He's played by an ex-pro wrestler named Tyler Mane. He was actually Tyler.
Sabretooth.
Yeah, he was Sabretooth. So that guy who's like 6'9", playing Mike Myers, right. And he's playing Michael Myers, and it's weird. It's so weird to have him as this giant mute, and I don't know. There's something weird about that because for me, Michael Myers should be like an average-looking guy. He shouldn't look threatening. He just never stops. So
exactly. He's threatening enough as a silent, almost unstoppable dude with a machete than he would be as, like, all right, now he has to be big or he has to be, speaking or whatever. It's like, no, this is like he's threatening enough. The original formula.
Yep. And
Michael Classic is just fine.
exactly. And he was never he's like 5'10" in this movie. Whereas Jason, when he gets introduced in the Friday the 13th series, he's already portrayed as like a bigger, larger than life person, and he's played by Kane Hodder. Eventually, he's like 6'4". So
huge. Yeah.
So that makes sense, but Michael Myers never needed to be that. So like I would skip the Rob Zombie ones. Watch Season of the Witch, by the way, because I think it's a really it's a cool kind of just self-contained story around Halloween, and it deals with they have like a piece of Stonehenge that ends up that's being used for magical powers, and it's got Dan O'Harely in it as and he's awesome, and it's bonkers. Tom Atkins is the main character in it, and it's got the most earworm song you will ever hear as a commercial jingle for these masks that are being made. It's crazy. It's cheesy 80s horror, but it's good. I really enjoy it. Like that's honestly my second favorite Halloween movie is Halloween 3.
Cool.
So, and then you can eventually get to the Thorn Cult trilogy if you want, but they're kind of, they fall into the tropes a little too hard and a little too much of the, if you like campy or cheesier horror movies, they're definitely worth a watch at some point, but it's kind of, there's a little too much of the, oh, how did he come back from that one? Because each one of them, they're like, no, he's definitely dead this time. And like, but he survived and here's how. And like, they all have a recap at the beginning of them, of the previous movie. They all do that.
Halloween.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, I mean, for me, I would skip those. I would skip Rob Zombie, go to the 2018 ones, but also watch Halloween 2. I think Halloween 2.
I might actually watch Halloween 2, the 1981 one, next, just because if it picks up where this one left off, it feels like, all right, let's complete that story, or at least watch the next, the same night story, and then my brain can say, all right, forget everything you just saw in that movie, let's watch Halloween, and that one, it goes off in a different direction. The 2018 Halloween.
Yep. That's how I would do it. And I think that you'll get the most enjoyment out of that, and it won't get too convoluted. And then as you get to stuff like if you eventually go to Halloween Kills or Halloween Ends, you're sort of, those three movies kind of can all exist in their own bubble in a way. Right. But they're all coming from this first movie, but it was worth it to watch this one first so that you can kind of see like what it can be and how good this type of movie can be. And then, sequels typically have diminishing returns often, anyway, because it's hard to recapture. And the thing that I like is that the David Gordon Green movies don't try to just be this movie again. They try to be their own movie set in the same world. And that's the smart thing to do, because you can't really ever recapture what Carpenter and them did in this. And that just kind of shoestring, 20-somethings making a movie for no money. Like, and just some of the stuff in the 78 Halloween that they had to do to make, because they shot it in Southern California in the spring. So it's not even,
it doesn't feel very cold, doesn't feel.
No. And in fact, in some shots, if you pay attention, you can see palm trees way off in the background.
Oh no, really? Okay.
Like very, just off in the background. All the leaves that are on the ground were fake. They had to buy leaves and paint them and then spread them around. And they would go through after they would finish a scene and collect them all to move them to the next scene. And if you're paying attention, like all the trees are full of leaves, but there's all these leaves on the ground too. So it's like, again, it's stuff that you don't even think about while you're watching because you're so engrossed in what they were doing. Even the pumpkins, they had a hell of a time getting pumpkins. And
right, because they'd be completely out of season.
Yeah. So if you notice when Tommy falls on when he's getting picked on at school, it kind of is already broken open because they didn't have another one to use. So they just had to like turn it and hold it in a different direction to do that shot again. So just the cost saving stuff and the things they had to do to make it work, to make this movie. And it's amazing. And it was such a huge hit that the guy who footed the bill for it, Mustafa Akkad, he didn't want to make a movie like this, but he agreed to put up $300,000 for it, and the movie made Worldwide, it was 70 million at the box office. And so he was like,
Wow.
cool, I'm going to keep making more of them. So his name is all over everything from there forward. It's all Akkad. He executive produced every one of them until he died in 2005, and then his son took over.
Huh. Okay. Well, I'm noticing that Halloween 2, the 1981 version, is streaming on Peacock, so
Yep.
which is where Halloween ends and probably Halloween Kills are. I'm kind of surprised the 2018 Halloween. I would think that because of the popularity of Kills and Ends, that they'd be streaming that one too, but apparently not. That one is it's on Fubo and FX now, but not on Peacock.
Yeah, my guess is probably something in a rights cycle. They go through all sorts of stuff, because I just saw where a bunch of, was it Nightmare on Elm Street, I think, is all leaving HBO Max at the end of November.
Max, yes. Yeah.
And the article I read was like, to make room for the slate of holiday movies. I'm like, make room? They're not eating up shelf
Right.
space. Like,
No, exactly. Yes.
so.
That's funny.
Oh, another fun thing, if you do go back and watch this movie again, the scene in the car at the beginning with Loomis and the nurse, who, by the way, that nurse, the actress that played her, came back in Halloween 2018 as the same character.
Really?
They brought her back.
Okay.
And Halloween H2O, now that I think about it. She was in that too.
Wow. Okay.
That scene, number one, Donald Pleasance had drank like 2 bottles of wine before they started shooting that.
Really? Okay.
So he's just sloshed while they're doing that. But when Michael jumps up on top of the car and she backs up to that window, and then you see the window get broken.
Yeah, it gets smashed.
If you pay attention next time, you can see the wrench they had taped to the guy's hand. That
really?
They taped a wrench to his hand and then painted it over kind of flesh colored, so when he'd hit the glass, it would break. And if you look, you can actually see it. They just they just couldn't cover it up enough, and I love that.
That's funny.
It's so many things like that. It's like now when I watch it, I just think about all those leaves and how somebody had to spray paint all of those, and then somebody had to go around and collect them all into a box and
move them to the next scene. Yeah.
And then this time around, I was reading, because I always like to go through like trivia stuff and see what's out there. And one of the things I read, and this one, I had to call this out. This is my my version of the film sack scrutiny.
Okay.
It was another tip-off that this film was not shot in Illinois, where the story takes place, is that Tommy's school has outdoor porticos instead of indoor hallways, a design feature only practical in warm states. It is only practical in warm states. However, I will call that one out because my high school had outdoor porticos, and I live further north than the fictional Haddonfield, Illinois.
Really? Wow.
My high school was designed by somebody who designed schools in California. And so when it was built, it was like that. It was after I graduated. They've since redone the whole school and turned it into one large building with everything enclosed. But when I went to school there, middle of winter, it would be -5 degrees outside and blowing snow, and you'd have to walk between buildings to get to class.
From one class to another, you're actually going outside. Yeah, we don't have any of that in Colorado. Like, obviously, everything is one entire enclosed school. You bounce around between classes there. But so I'd always see these movies growing up, these teenage movies, and even going into the 80s and 90s, like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Clueless, where the students are out in this common area between classes, going outside and then into another class. And I never understood, like, what kind of school is that?
Yeah. Yep. So
It's
I just
like a minimum security prison.
kind of, yeah. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Like, no, my school was exactly like that, but my school was designed by somebody who had no clue what they were doing for this area.
Golly, so you'd have to bundle up to go between classes.
Oh, yeah.
What a pain in the butt.
Oh, it was terrible. But yeah, that's also the body count for this.
Just 3, right?
So total, it is Linda and Bob, which is PJ Souls and her boyfriend. It is Annie.
Bob, yes, of course. Yeah.
She's got Linda, Bob, Annie, Judith Myers.
Michael's sister.
Yep. And then the unnamed driver of the truck that he kills to take his coveralls, that we just see the body.
Sure. We just see him laying in the ditch. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
The by the way, Tina, my wife, big fan of Real Housewives,
Oh yeah.
and so we get Kyle Richards, who is one of the prominent featured characters, I should say, on on Real Housewives, but the sister of Kim Richards, who I had such a crush on in the 70s and 80s from her Witch Mountain movies.
That's right. I forgot about
She
that.
was the blonde version of Kim Richards. They looked identical, except for one was a blonde, one was a brunette, and these days they couldn't look more dissimilar.
Yeah. What was that? There was another thing. Oh, when so the moment where Annie and Lori ride up and they see her dad and they pull up to the hardware store, which timing wise doesn't make any sense why he would be there for the break-in, because Michael had already taken stuff and was wearing the mask earlier. But
yes,
throw that aside, like there's no way he didn't know they were smoking weed when she rolled down that window.
Right. Oh, no kidding. I mean, that should just have been a cloud that emanated from the car as soon as they rolled the window down. And then, Jamie Lee Curtis is talking right to him, and you think it'd be like, pop, pop, pop,
Yes.
pop.
I love that moment. I just chuckle every time. I'm trying to think. Did you have a favorite? Is there a favorite moment or shot or anything that really stuck with you on this watching? Or
100%. It's the scene where Jamie Lee Curtis, I think, has stabbed him. Let's see. It's before she runs into the closet and stabs him with the coat hanger and then comes back. But it's a scene where she's sitting there on the floor on the left side, lower left side of the screen, and this darkness on the right side, and you just slowly, it's like you're wondering, am I seeing his face there? And then, oh, I'm definitely seeing his face there. And it's so perfectly shot to where Michael Myers' mask is just, barely, it's like in a video game when you first start the game up and it says adjust your brightness to where you can barely see this logo. That's what it is. It's like just the darkness to where you can barely see Michael Myers' mask.
It's so good. And it was just a light dimmer. They would just have a dimmer on that, and it was just enough to illuminate the mask. And it's
so effective.
It's perfect. Yeah. It's so good. Yeah. I love that one, and I really like, just for the simplicity of it, because the beginning of the movie is so many of these moments where it's just Michael staring at her, like from across the street when she's in class, and she looks away and looks back and the car's gone. But my favorite one is the hedge, where he's standing in front of the hedge.
Yes.
And he just steps behind it, and then when they get up there, he's gone. Because like, Michael Myers doesn't run, ever.
No, No.
But in the back of my head, I always picture him stepping behind that and then just taking off in a dead sprint.
Right. I mean, you'd have to get so far away they couldn't see him.
Part of it is because back in the days when I was doing sketch comedy on our local public access channel, we did a sketch where I played a Michael Myers style silent killer, and we remade that shot, but with like an alleyway. So I was standing next to a building, and then I would step behind it, and we brought the camera up and looked around the corner. So once I stepped out of frame, I had to sprint like halfway down this alley and dive behind a dumpster so you couldn't see me. So part of it is that. But yeah, those are the ones that stick with me. And then, of course, the end of the movie is that open-ended moment where Loomis goes out and looks, and the body's gone.
Sure.
And they shot two versions of that. One with Loomis looking like really scared and freaked out by the fact that the body's gone. And then the other one was supposedly Donald Pleasance was like, yeah, no, I think that he would just have a look on his face like, well, I kind of knew this was going to happen. And they went with that. And it's so good. And then all those.
It's so much more effective. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And to have that shot followed up by just the music playing, and they start showing all the different images of empty areas and the breathing, which was a cool story. And in that Movies That Made Us, they talk about it. They didn't have a lot of extra footage because there was such a small shoot. So they didn't have a bunch of establishing shots. So it was actually the editor had happened to keep all of the offcuts that would be like before slate and stuff.
Okay.
When they
before the actors were on.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the shot or anything.
And so they ended up
Huh.
like piecing those together and using those for that final, and they were making it
Just
up,
so effective.
and it's such a great way to end the movie.
Yeah.
And it leaves it. What I like is that it leaves it open ended, but if you ended things there and never made another sequel with those characters, like now you're just wondering what's going on, what's happening, and I like that a lot. So it's all those different elements are what make this like my favorite of the slasher movies. Franchise wise, the Halloween franchise is middle of the road, because I think when you take into account all of the movies, something like Nightmare on Elm Street, I feel like it's a better overall franchise because it has more consistently good movies. But this one in particular is so good that it makes me enjoy the rest of the franchise that much more. So I just really love this, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I'm glad that you finally got to see it.
I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah, and I'm glad I finally did get around to seeing it, not just writing off saying, "Well, I feel like I've seen enough of it to know what the deal is," because there was a lot more to it than the clips and all the pieces and parts that I've seen. So I'm excited to continue on with it. And like I said, I think first step will be Halloween 2 from 1981.
Excellent. I would look forward to hearing you what you think of that one. Maybe we'll get a recommendal at some point.
There you go. Yeah, you just might. Actually, it's really good. It's really good use for recommendals, honestly.
Really, really is. Well, thank you, Brian, so much for being here this week. This was fun. So
Always a pleasure.
For the half dozen people out there that don't know what you work on, let people know where they can find the stuff that you do.
Yeah, basically, online I'm known as Coverville, or you can find me under Coverville on all the social platforms. But the show that easily has the most traction and that I'm known for the most is The Morning Stream, which is Frog Pants Studios production, frogpants.com/TMS, and it's a daily comedy program that is like a radio station morning zoo without all the obnoxious parts to it. So no phony phone calls or honking horns and stuff like that, and no traffic and weather on the 10s either.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, the TMS is great. Coverville is a ton of fun. I love that show.
Cool. Oh, thank you.
So
Thanks.
Thank you for being here. I did have one clip I wanted to play. I'm just gonna play this, and then and you can enjoy it.
Totally.
That is like 60% of the dialogue PJ Soul says in the movie is the word totally.
That's awesome. Wow. Okay.
There was only one I didn't capture, and it was right after her and Bob have sex, because she says totally one more time, but there was other like rustling noises, and you just couldn't hear it. It wasn't worth it.
Gotcha. So apparently, yeah, the valley, the Los Angeles Valley is also in Illinois.
Yes.
Who knew?
Yeah, who knew?
Who knew?
But yeah, I had to play that one because that's too good. So thank you once again. Now this show, if you enjoy this and you want to watch it live and be like our chat room tonight's been very active. Bombats, Claire Gack's in there, Ace Cat, Tondagosa. You can do that Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern time at twitch.tv/TV's Travis. I record it live every week, put it out as a podcast on Wednesdays. If you want to support the show and get that podcast version early, you can do that at patreon.com/WYHS for as little as $1 an episode. There are also things such as I'm going to start doing monthly patron movie nights for catch-up. So if you have maybe an episode of the show that you've skipped because you haven't seen the movie before, we'll watch the movie, and then you can listen to the episode, that kind of stuff. So...
Well, I thought you basically were giving out ketchup if they watched the movie. Okay.
If you show up, you get a single packet of ketchup. Yes. So that is that is stuff that you can do there. And then, the show is available anywhere you get podcasts. But because I titled it "Wait, You Haven't Seen ... It's easiest to go to tvstravis.com, and then you can subscribe from there. So once again, Brian, thank you so much. I have had a great time.
Pleasure.
And
thank you, Travis, for having me.
Yeah, and like I always like to say, enjoy your movies, and it's spooky season, but still be excellent to each other.
The only reason she babysits is to have a place to...
Shit. I have a place for that.
And there we go. I just noticed your shirt.
Yes.
It took me a while to figure out that those were all skeletons. That's awesome.
They're all skeletons. It's a technically it's a Dia del Muerte shirt, but certainly applies since I'll be wearing costume tomorrow for TMS and after. But this is like this is what I get to wear the day before.
So Brian Dunaway had his monthly community game yesterday. We were playing Among Us, and he asked if anyone was in costume because Claire had done a lion costume, and I said, "Yeah, I'm casual Hagrid today." Was what I was going for.
Nice. It seems like you're casual Hagrid every day.
Yeah, kind of. It's a lifestyle.
I love it. Love it.
Oh, thank you.
Totally
This
love
is super fun.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And let me know when this goes live. I will share the crap out of it.
Definitely will. And I can't wait to hear what you think of Halloween 2 and also the connection. I'm curious about that. So that'll be fun.
I'm looking forward to that. And if I can get Tina to watch it tonight, we'll watch it tonight. Otherwise, I guess I'm watching it solo next time I get a chance. But that won't be hard to do either.
It's bloodier than this one, but it's still very tame. It's definitely when you get to the 2018 trilogy, there's a few moments of special effects gore in that are like, whoa, okay, they went that far. Just with the times, like the sensibilities are so different now. But yeah, excellent. Well, if you get a chance to watch that tonight, cool. If not, hopefully soon. But enjoy the rest of your night, and I'm looking forward to seeing the costume tomorrow.
Thanks, Travis.
I took the day off,
Have a good night.
so I'm going to just be hanging out.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, we'll see you in hopefully see you in chat.
Oh, definitely. All right. Have a great night.
Have a good night.
Bye. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for hanging out. As always, this was super fun. Yeah, Barbarian, I hear is good. Yes, I think he plans to watch that one too. I know Scott's been telling him about it. But yeah, thank you, Bombats and Claire for staying up late. Ace for hanging out. I saw Monica in there. Wicked. Thank you. You guys are great. And let's see. I've got tomorrow off, so I think I'm going to do some extra streams tomorrow. I think I'm going to try and finish up Alan Wake maybe in the afternoon. And then, yeah, I know I haven't seen Barbarian. I'm going to. I didn't mention next week. Next week is 12 Monkeys for this show. That'll be fun. Anywho, but I plan on doing a little bit of streaming tomorrow afternoon, and then tomorrow night, 9:00 Eastern time, is going to be Those Were the Days, and we're doing the Halloween episode of Home Improvement. So that'll be fun. So many monkeys, all 12 of them. All 12 of them. All right, I'm going to get out of here, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. You're wonderful. I love you all, and next week... No, I've got 12 Monkeys next week. That'll be fun. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Bombats. Kit, thank you for being here. And have a great night, and enjoy your spooky night and your Halloween tomorrow. Make sure to get lots of candy. All right? Bye, everybody.